I got to pull up this story from the New York Times because, boy, you want to talk about World War III. The New York Times reports the U.S. believes Ukrainians were behind an assassination in Russia. Just say in the headline, the assassination of Daria Dugina. American officials said they were not aware of the plan ahead of time for the attack that killed Daria Dugina and that they had admonished Ukraine over it. Oh, admonished. So what do you think Russia is going to say to that? It's war, right? They're not even, Russia's not even calling this a war yet. What do you think the people, I mean, this is the kind of thing with U.S. admission now that will boost morale among Russians.
So did you see the clip of Jeffrey Sachs on Bloomberg recently that's gone kind of viral, where he is basically saying, hey, the rest of the world, the optics on this is the U.S. blew up this Nord Stream pipeline, and actually this conflict is a proxy war between the United States and Russia. He's like, that's how everybody else sees it.
And they were like, whoa, well, hold on there. Well, I don't know about that.
Exactly. Well, I actually, so the 2-minute clip that's going around on Twitter, there's an 8-minute clip. And Jeffrey Sachs nails it throughout. I actually covered it yesterday. But that's the thing. The rest of the world already understands the narrative is the United States is in a full-on proxy war with Russia. We're not even acknowledging that.
I mean, it's not a proxy war. It's war. NATO is in Poland. The military supplies are being delivered to Ukraine, and it's so obvious that NATO is now worried Russia will strike Poland because that's where they're delivering the weapons. So it's like, the way I describe it, let's say there's a dude throwing rocks at you, and you're like, bro, stop throwing rocks at me. And behind him is another guy handing him rocks. Are we going to be like, the guy handing him rocks has nothing to do with this, and we're not fighting? No, both of them are at war with you. So it's not a proxy war. We've got American citizens and NATO citizens on the ground in Ukraine, and they're going, we're just volunteers. Oh, spare me, dude. NATO is delivering weapons, tanks. They just sent a bunch of Apache helicopters to Poland. Poland now wants nukes. And then those weapons are being delivered to American veterans who are fighting as mercenaries for Ukraine. That's a technicality. I don't think Vladimir Putin is looking at that and going, well, he's not formally working for the U.S. No, he's just armed by them, a citizen of the country, and benefits from it, and fighting for a country that is being massively funded to the tune of billions of dollars by the U.S. Come on. Putin's not some moron who's like looking over a legal document being like, well, I would declare war on NATO, but they found all the loopholes. They're able to go to war with us, but it's not formal, so what am I supposed to do?
Similar to Vietnam, where the Chinese were sending the North Vietnamese all sorts of weapons and tanks, but we didn't strike China or Russia. I think the Russians were involved with spreading it to North Korea or North Vietnam too, but it's really the military contractors are profiting off of limited war. They don't want a total war. They don't want Russia to attack Poland. They don't want the U.S. to drop bombs in Moscow. They want to just keep selling weapons to the front to these poor Ukrainians who are in this flat terrain that are just getting artillery shelled, and then they keep profiting. It's really a war for profit, I think, and a small amount of land that Putin wants to connect to Crimea.
Well, to Tim's point on the proxy, Michael Tracy, who I follow on Twitter, I think he does some really good work, is outright saying that U.S. soldiers are in command and control of the ground warfare there.
Of course, well, come on.
But I would take it a step further and say, well, our Starlink systems are arming the Ghost and Sidewinder drones that are killing Russian soldiers. The concentration of Starlink there is 12,000. It's the greatest concentration on the planet. I would say that's overt warfare.
And the U.S. provided the intelligence used by the Ukrainians who used NATO weapons to blow up the flagship of Putin's or Russia's Black Sea fleet. So, come on.
Yeah, World War II, the U.S. was selling weapons to England they were giving them Lend-Lease. They weren't even charging them. And the Germans knew, but the Germans were like, well, this sucks. We can't declare war on America because that will lose the war. But then eventually after the United States declared war on Japan,
Musk made that argument, actually, that he lost $80 million on their latest satellite launches into the Ukraine. He put out that poll on, that solution. But if you follow that thread, he says, look, we actually lost money sending these Starlink satellites out there. So he's admitting that they're being used in warfare, but he wants to kind of paint the picture. It's just for communications for the good guys. But again, they're hooking up to drones that are taking real lives. That's real warfare, in my opinion.
And, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, came out and called Elon Musk the true hero of the Ukrainian war. And now Elon Musk is being labeled a traitor to the Ukrainian people, which is absolutely totally absurd. And it's not just satellite internet. It's also satellite images. It's also GPS tracking. It's also troop movements that the United States is advising the Ukrainian troops, saying, hey, we're going to say we're going to Kherson, but really we're going to Lyman. And then now we're going to fake Lyman. Now we're going to Kherson because this is how the troops are moving in this specific region. This is the weak spots that we see here. And with the weaponry that they have, the advanced technology. Today I saw a video of a Ukrainian using a drone denial weapon against a Russian DJI Mavic drone that was flying over getting reconnaissance. And a Russian soldier had this huge gun that was provided to him by the West.
The
that
Ukrainian soldier.
Ukrainian soldier had this huge gun that pointed at the drone and just took it down right away.
Did they reuse it? Did they recover it and then use it?
Probably, yeah. Because the Russians, a lot of them are buying, DJIs off of the private market and literally using them for reconnaissance. Meanwhile, the United States is using satellite imagery to, get all the information about where they are, the exact GPS coordinates. The coordinates are put into the Starlink satellites, connected to the weaponries, the weapons, and the missiles just fly directly on top of the Russians.
You know that there are psychotic nerds that are just like tracking the data analytics and like, oh, this is how people act when think they're at war and afraid. What if we turn up the fear? Oh, this is how they act. Oh, they send weapons. Oh, they tend to go further south where it's warmer when they're afraid. Oh, like weird, crazy, psychopathic scientists that are like pushing it.
But today, also very interestingly, it's very captivating to see technology play such an active role in this a proxy war between the East and the West, because also, very interestingly, the Ukrainian government also expelled Iranian diplomats from their country, specifically because Iran provided suicide drones to the Russians that they have allegedly used today on a military camp inside of Kiev. So there's big news today that an Iranian drone struck inside of Kiev, and that was specifically why Ukrainians expelled Iranian diplomats from their country.
What kind of suicide drone? Was it like strapped with a bomb or something?
No, it's just a drone that flies up, and then when it lands, it explodes.
So this is something that you mentioned earlier. Business Insider: Russia's space agency chief claimed his nation could destroy NATO countries in half an hour during a nuclear war. So highlighting this, when you have the U.S. being like, oh, Ukraine just assassinated the daughter, a prominent reporter and the daughter of a prominent influencer, or whatever you want to call him, philosopher, in Russia, and we're just going along with what they're doing, they are going to drag us into a war where they are capable of and directly threatening to wipe out the entirety of NATO, which includes us. I would much prefer not to be nuked because I've grown quite fond of living. So for everybody else, maybe we can tell Ukraine to knock off this kind of insanity. If you want to defend your land because Russia's invading, totally get it. Going into Russia and killing some dude's daughter and a prominent journalist, hey, maybe that's a big mistake.
Well, they are at war. When you're at war, there's nothing's off the table.
That's true. This idea that, I'm reading these articles and they're like Putin's illegal invasion. I'm like, I'm sure Putin cares about what you think is legal.
Yeah, really.
It really is insane that we have these concepts of like war crimes. Now, I get it. To a certain degree, we're going to try and stop these things from happening and create some kind of framework for if you do it, there will be severe penalties when we defeat you. But it's like at the same time, if somebody is fighting against you with the intent to kill you, they're going to do anything and everything. Your laws are meaningless. Your war crimes are meaningless.
There's that gentleman war where if you're fighting the enemy, you want to capture their commander and then sell them back rather than kill them. You don't want to kill everybody. You want to profit off the war. That's the point of the war, is you want to come up better afterwards. So
right, but if we're talking about existential conflict, when we're talking about with the colonial wars, it was like over territory and new lands and things like that. Then they're going to be like, okay, fine, you can take that territory. Oh, we've lost Quebec, or whatever. But what we're talking about here is Putin thinking or saying that, he says he would use nuclear weapons if there's an existential threat to Russia. NATO encroaching on its borders and cutting off its ability to sell fuel into Europe is probably an existential threat to Russia. This is not Russia's interests overseas. This is their actual border being threatened. So I don't think they're going to play any games where they're like, we'll capture them and sell them back. No, they're going to be like, destroy them.
Maybe, but I don't think that they want Russia to get nuked. Like if nukes drop all over Russian cities, they lose. So
I think if nukes drop, it's mutually assured destruction. I can't believe people aren't talking more about that. You don't think so, huh? You think that we can have kind of these tactical nuclear wars where only certain areas are hit and it doesn't just set off that chain reaction?
Yep. So tactical nukes first. We'll start with tactical nukes being much lower yield. We're not talking about an ICBM wiping out 1 million people. We're talking about 10,000 to 100,000, depending on the yield of the tactical nuke. Really, really bad. But there was a great quote. I can't remember who just said it recently. They said, if Putin issues a nuclear strike on a NATO nation, there will not be a nuclear response because the American president would have to be insane to sacrifice Boston for Poznan. So if Putin were to nuke that, the U.S. is going to be like, if we respond, they'll respond again. And then we will actually get hit ourselves in our homeland and be forced to defend ourselves here. If the fighting stays over there, they'll probably respond with full-scale conventional warfare, not a nuclear strike. There's no reason for Putin right now to just be like, I'm going to nuke D.C. Now, if you fired a nuke at D.C., yeah, maybe we would fire a nuke back at Moscow or something, and that's the deterrent. Don't do it because we'll do it back.
We'd fire like 100 nukes back at like 30 at Moscow, 30 at Novosibirsk. We'd all over the spot, all over the place. And then they'd fire a million at the United States.
If Putin is using nuclear artillery and tactical nukes in Ukraine, ain't nobody going to respond. If they drop a 100 kiloton bomb on Kiev and kill 20, 30,000 people, NATO will not nuke back. That's because Ukraine is not a NATO nation, and no NATO nation is going to sacrifice their capital for anything in Ukraine. Right now, they're content with sending supplies and having them fight. They don't want Russia to win. But I don't see, Poland's asking for nukes. I don't see Poland sacrificing Poznan for Kiev. Kiev could get hit, and they're going to be like, we don't want to get hit next. So we're not going to respond in kind. Not only that, but they can't even respond if they wanted to. They have no nukes.
I guess my greatest fear is if any kind of nuclear strike happens anywhere, our world changes overnight. And it just gives you this excuse to roll out all sorts of martial law / authoritarian measures wherever. It wouldn't matter which side it was on. Say that happens. Say 10,000 people get taken out in a tactical strike in the Ukraine. You don't think that this administration here would utilize that not only to instill fear on the American public, but pass certain executive orders and measures that would restrict. Yeah, I mean, that's
Directive 51. You guys know Directive 51?
Tell me about it.
You ever played the game The Division?
No, I never played.
Oh, come on. That game's great.
Was there a Bush directive?
Directive.
After 9/11?
And I think it was in like 2007. We're not sure if it's legal. It's never been tested. But National Security Presidential Directive 51 allows the president to basically overwrite the U.S. government and create a new one.
Yeah, that was George Bush.
George Bush. And I believe Obama revised it. Since then, it's gone through several changes. Many people have said it's a nonsense executive order because the executive branch doesn't have the authority to overthrow the U.S. government because of an emergency. But the language of it is nuts. It basically says if any kind of disaster happens anywhere, the president of the United States can declare an enduring constitutional government and install a continuity coordinator who now runs all of the branches. And it creates one branch that controls everything.
This would be, quote, any incident, regardless of location, that results in extraordinary levels of mass casualties, damage, or disruption severely affecting the U.S. population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functions. Disruption severely affecting the U.S. population. So like what, a hurricane, a storm, a blackout?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not been tested. Many people think that if they tried to do it, there'd be challenges. The problem is, in a circumstance where they do declare, I think it's been updated and there's a different executive order on the books now. But in the event that something happens, like a nuke does drop on Kiev, I really doubt there's going to be, no one in the United States is going to be able to do anything about it if they do it, because it would just be civil war. You're going to get people who are just going to be like, dude, a nuke was dropped. I'm not standing up. I'm not do whatever, right? Most people will probably say, I'm scared of nukes. So when the government says we're at war and this is the way it is, they'll just say, okay.
I'm concerned with false flags here because anybody could drop a nuke anywhere.
Well, that's my point. If a nuke goes off, no one knows who actually did it. You know who they'll blame, right? Regardless, Russia's going to get blamed.
They've been blaming Russia for everything. It's like some dude's like walking and Democrat stubs his toe and he's like, Putin put that rock there. And, Donald Trump wins an election. And of course it had to be Putin.
Well, they've been laying down the groundwork for this for many years now. I mean, the Cold War essentially never ended. It's only escalating from here. There were many proxy wars. Even recently, Syria was a major proxy war between the East and the West. Now that theater moved. The conflict still continues in Syria, but that theater moved to Ukraine. It's expanding. It's growing. And for the last few years, the corporate media with the intelligence agencies have been laying down the groundwork. Russia, 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 nonstop, even when there was reasons not to criticize them. There's a lot of things you could criticize about Russia. There's a lot of things that they did in Georgia, in Crimea, that you could, of course, heavily criticize with the destruction of civil liberties and human rights in their country. Sure, there's a lot of things you could do that. But the intelligentsia here in the United States made stuff up just to point the finger and blame on Russia.
I think I know what really happened. Before all of this, back in December, Putin had a secret meeting with Joe Biden, right? And they were like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fake this war, right? You know why? Because then Putin's like, I'm going to use nukes. And then you respond, the aliens reveal themselves and shut down the nukes. And that's how we get him to come out of hiding. That proves it. I'm kidding, by the way. Let's jump to this next story from the Telegraph.
Before we do, I gotta say, if what they're doing is a psyop and they're trying to get me to beg for a new world order, it's starting to work, because any kind of order, global order, would be, well, maybe not any, but would be better than a nuclear war, in my opinion.
This is the best way to do it. You get Biden and Putin, firing nukes at each other, and then whoever you want to actually run your new government comes out and says, people, the war is bad. It's not working. Join me, and we'll bring about a cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Single currency for the planet. We'll end all of this.
Embed the chip in your wrist, and you will be immune to nuclear fallout.
A central bank digital currency, which the U.S. Federal Reserve and many other countries are putting into practice. That alien stuff. There are some very notable people that do believe aliens have prevented nuclear war on this planet. There are some defense ministers of Canada. I'm expanding on it. Jason's shaking his head here. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, this is the bigger context to what Tim is saying here.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.